All righty. So I think we have a good number of us who said we were going to join. So why don't we get started? I'm Aggie Malter. I'm the Executive Director of PAISBOA. I'm delighted all of you are here today. For those of you who collect CPE credits, we are offering 1 CPE credit for this workshop this morning. So thank you to Carol and Lisa for working on this. And I'm going to let Carol and Lisa introduce themselves to you. But just a little bit of housekeeping. So if you've joined us late, I'd like you to mute yourself and use the chat function to ask questions so we can keep it moving forward. As soon as Carol and Lisa introduce themselves, I'm going to share my screen with you so that you can see the PowerPoint presentation that they've created. So without further ado, I'll present to you Carol and Lisa.
Hi, I'm Carol Lerner. I'm the Director of Finance and Operations at the Philadelphia School. We have a budget of $11 million. We're preschool through 8, and I have been the Director of Finance and Operations for 9 years.
And not sure if, sorry, my screen is showing me all sorts of weird things right now, but my name is Lisa. What?
T. Farnsworth is sharing their screen right now. If you could stop screen sharing, that would be very helpful.
So so I'm Lisa Carbone Warren. I'm the Director of Finance and Operations at Moorestown Friends School in New Jersey, in South Jersey, not too far from Philadelphia. And I've been here for maybe 27 years. So glad to be with you guys this afternoon. Back to you, Carol.
Okay, I think we're still trying to get something up here.
Right.
Hang on one second. I'm just about to get started with that. Hang on one second here.
Lisa, you just want to start with the overview?
Sure. Yeah, let me just, okay.
Hang on one second, and let me just get this. How's that? Can you all see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
We can. And Aggie, are you going to advance the slides?
Yeah.
Okay, we can move on to the next slide.
Okay.
So just in, very brief, so we were talking about zero-based budgeting or ZBB on the listserv, and there seemed to be a lot of interest in that. So Carol volunteered us to talk to you guys a little bit and tell you how we apply zero-based budgeting at our school. So just in brief, as an overview, what this allows you to do is it puts in place a process where the managers, and by managers, I mean anybody who has budget responsibility at your school. So that could be your department chairs, it could be your division heads, it could be your department managers such as development, admissions, head of school, your plant managers, all of those areas that we look at budgets and develop budgets. All of those people must justify on an annual basis all of their budgeted expenditures rather than using what you might call an incremental approach to budgeting, where you have a budget and each year you just increase it by some percentage. So basically that's what we're going to be talking about on the next couple slides. Next 2 or 3 slides, we have the advantages, and that was your cue, Aggie. On the next 2 or 3 slides, Aggie, can you advance it? I'm just not sure if Aggie's hearing me.
I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you. I'm trying to. There we go.
Okay. So, and so just, I'm not going to read through all of these, but I've listed a couple slides worth of advantages, and then we'll talk just briefly about the disadvantages. But I think that Carol will touch on these in a more specific way later on in the presentation. But just basically to run quickly through the some of the advantages to zero-based budgeting is that starting off with it forces your managers, and again I'm using the term managers but I think you all know who I mean, all of those people who are responsible for a budget. It requires them to really look at and analyze on an ongoing basis what expenditures they're planning and what expenditures they've had historically, and to consider whether there might be better ways to approach those costs, such as outsourcing, for example. It also assures that you don't have that budget inflation where your budgets are just automatically increasing by a certain amount, regardless of whether that's actually warranted or not. It also, for me, the really best thing that zero-based budgeting does is it encourages communication between departments, between offices like the business office, where you really have to sit down and talk about what it is you're planning to do in the next year in an intentional way, so that you can then identify the costs that are going to be associated with those plans that you're making. There's lots of other advantages where basically it just has to do with the fact that you are starting from scratch and you are planning what your future approach is going to be for your department or your division, and it's not just a catch-all where you're saying, well, we're going to just budget $5,000 for this. Why $5,000? What is it you're planning to do that's going to cost $5,000? Maybe you've included in your $5,000 some activities that may be better placed in another department, or maybe they're already in another department and there's some redundancies. Aggie, you can go to the next slide. So, and then just to sort of sum up the advantages of zero-based budgeting, I think it allows the school to really focus on their mission and their objectives, because it gives you that lens where you are going to, again, intentionally think about every cost that you are requesting in your budget and tie it back to the school's mission. And it also requires then, or mandates, that there's a review of the budget as you go throughout the school year. So that's just, briefly, you can read through those slides later on as you like. And I think Carol's going to touch on some more of the sort of advantages or benefits of zero-based budgeting. And Aggie, you can move on to the next slide. And just the disadvantages of zero-based budgeting, I think the only disadvantage is that it is time-consuming, or I should say the only, but it does involve people who may, in the past, not have thought of themselves as budget managers. And maybe in the past, you have a system where you just tell somebody, for your department, this is how much money you have, and then they just spend the money and they don't think about whether or not they're going to exceed their budget or go under their budget, or whether that's the right amount. And this so it requires more planning, more managing of the people who actually own the budget, if you will. And sometimes that involves some training, which again, I think Carol will talk about, because she does that at her school as she meets with her employees and goes over how to come up with the zero-based budget and then how to monitor it throughout the year. So that's just a little bit of an overview before I'm going to turn it over, I think, to Carol.
Right, and I will talk more about advantages. Could you go back a minute, Aggie? The previous slide. There's one other in the disadvantages. There's something that to talk about is that it requires real understanding of the budget owners, and you definitely can use training to help with that. But you may have to also help pick your budget owners to make sure that they are willing and able to do these tasks. And then another disadvantage, and this can be a challenge, is you really need to provide consequences of not providing a zero-based budget, because a lot of people say, oh, can you just add 3%? And basically everyone starts with zero at my school, and you get a budget once you create a budget. And that can be hard and that can be time consuming, but once you get it down, it works very well. So you can go on to the next slide. I'm going to just share the budget timeline at the Philadelphia school, and I know that every school has a slightly different budget timeline, but I thought this would give context as I'm talking about the meetings that take place. So in November, we look at the large budget changes to set tuition, and then we and I'm requesting of everyone, what are large changes, either more expense or less expense that you anticipate? Then in February, and then in December, of course, our tuition goes out. And then February, I hand out the budget template, which I'll show later on. And the budget needs are discussed with the division heads. So if there are, each of the budget managers is looking to their division head or their manager to say, well, I think I need these items, and this is what it's going to cost. And the division heads are doing some preliminary vetting of that request. And then budget requests are made to other departments, facilities, and other places, especially when you want to have a department do something in collaboration. Departments need to talk to one another to talk about needs that may not affect their own budget lines, but another budget would affect another budget. And then in March, I have individual meetings with the budget owners as needed. So not every budget owner needs to have an individual meeting to do their budget, but some do. And I make myself available then. Then the first drafts of the budgets are due to finance. And then in April, the final budgets are due to finance. I have discussions with the admin team to talk about whether anything needs to change. And then finally in May, our budget for the following year is approved by the board. Aggie, you can go on to the next slide.
Can I interrupt for a moment? I think there's one person who needs to mute their computer. It might be D. Grad, who might have joined us late.
The next thing is the budget structure. So I have decentralized, which is where you would have zero-based budgeting for people outside of the finance office. And that's split into instructional and administrative. So for instructional, each classroom unit has their own budget. And then the specialists have their own budgets. And then there's a few budgets for school-wide type initiatives, such as theme or intensives. So in all, we have about 20 budget owners. And on the next page, Aggie.
Carol.
Yeah.
Can I just going back to that slide a moment, just to tie on to what you're saying. So at my school, similarly, we have three divisions. We have a lower school, a middle school, and an upper school. And so the lower school division director has budget responsibility for all the classroom units. And then in the middle school and the upper school, we have department chairs who sit down and put together their budget, and then they submit it to their division director. So just wanted to add that.
And that's a good point. I have a very decentralized model here, but if zero-based budgeting can work in a very decentralized model, if you have something that's a little more centralized, it's probably even easier because there are less people to train. So on the next pages are our administrative structure. So all of these lines have their own budgets. So our admissions has their own budget, development, the nurse, the head of school, obviously, and then our auxiliary programs also have their own budget structure. So like I said, there's about 20 people involved who have budget responsibilities, and many of them have several lines. I have a pretty big chart of accounts, so people are managing multiple lines.
And we do the same thing at my school as far as administrative budgets go. The admissions director submits a budget for all of their costs associated with admissions. And as you said, it's several lines. It might be supplies, it might be memberships, it might be marketing, or maybe marketing isn't a good example, but printing, test fees, things like that.
And if you could go to the next slide, Aggie. So the ones that are centralized, which are truly budgeted by me, are very few. Payroll, banking, utilities, staff recruitment, and capital expenditures. And these are lines without much discretion. And, you know, what I do, you know, point out to people is that the budgets are with them. I don't get to decide what should be spent at the school. The ones that I have are pretty much, they are what they are. And so, you know, when people, you know, wonder, is this in, you know, can we afford this in the budget? I say, I don't know. Let's talk to someone who has a budget line that would, that might have that in it. You know, it's not like there's this hoard of money sitting for me to dole out. So noting that the lines that I have are few and few is important to have. Someone needs to mute. The next page, please, Aggie. I have budget meetings, and this is the heart of the way I do zero-based budgeting. Is I have monthly budget meetings. In the beginning of the year, I have a budget 101 for all new employees and all new budget owners at the beginning of that school year. And then I have monthly budget meetings. They're the second Monday of every month, and they're a half-hour meetings. I have a half hour for the faculty or instructional budgets, and then I have a separate half hour, which is the second half hour of that day, is for the administrative budgets. And then I have a completely separate one for auxiliary programs. In those meetings, we talk about budget to actual tracking year over year. I show them how much they have spent this time last year, and then how much they spent this time this year, so that they have some things to go on about how they're doing with their spending. It's also the time that they have to provide all their receipts for their credit card expenses. Each budget owner does have a credit card here, which is a whole different topic. I'm not going to get into that, but like I said, there is a decentralized expenses here. And then questions are answered and potential issues are raised about budgets or about changes. And then for budget planning, at the February meeting, I provide the templates for the budget planning, and I start to schedule individual meetings for people who need help in developing their zero-based budget. You go to the next page, Aggie. Okay, the themes, these are some of the benefits that Lisa alluded to earlier. Is where I find that zero-based budgeting is really helpful is it makes sure that all the anticipated expenses are in the budget lines. So no one is ever saying to me, is this in my budget? Because I'll say back to them, I don't know. Did you put it in your budget? And I do encourage them to put some general or, you know, some little reserves if they don't know a specific initiative, but they know they're going to want to spend money, so that they're not shortchanging their budget some uncertainties. I'm in a progressive school, so there is a lot of uncertainty about what we're going to do year over year because it is student-led.
Although I don't know if I want to hear your music, but apart from that, it's fine.
Could we mute? I think someone's not muted.
Mike, can you mute your computer?
Oh, yes. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
And then it ensures that important decisions are made prior to the start of the year. It really requires people to think about what they're going to do in the following year and what it's going to cost them. It speeds up decision making in the year because they know what's going to be in their budget and they know how they're going to spend it, and there's not that, you know, wondering, oh, can we do this? Who can put that in their budget? I think it really empowers the faculty and staff. A lot of people really like being budget managers in this model. And then it also prevents me from making curricular decisions, which I know that the faculty and staff really appreciate, there isn't someone with a pen who's pretty far removed from the classrooms making decisions. It's really their decisions. And also, finally, when we're talking about growth, and when you have classrooms and changes that go year over year, sometimes people don't really understand how much their expenses are going to change until they really put pen to paper. Examples are if, you only have a few more students, but that requires another bus. I mean, for us, we take buses to the country every week. And that little thing, like an extra bus, is a really big change to a budget. It wouldn't be indicated if you just went up 3%, for example, in a given year. The same thing if your class size goes really down or other changes are made as well. The next page, please. So the resources I use, which was kind of the start of this conversation, if anyone was in the original listserv question about zero-based budgets, people wanted templates, and I went, wait a minute, the template is not the answer. It is part of the answer. It's, how we get people to put pen to paper, but really the monthly meetings, I think, is what makes it effective. So on the next few pages, we have those materials. They're just examples, and after this, Aggie can send everyone the actual templates in Excel if you would like them, but they're really pretty basic. I put a unit's name on there, and then the kinds of things that they want to consider. People completely customize these as they see fit, but what we have is supplies and costs that vary by student. I give them the expected number of students they're going to have in the following year. They figure out their trips. We give them the estimate of what the buses will cost in the following year. And then performances and other kinds of things are also put in, and they do not vary by number of student. So these are very customized, and people who have been budget owners for a long time, these look different. And I'm fine with them looking whatever, and they say how much detail, and I say the amount of detail you need to know what is in your budget is the appropriate amount of detail. The next page would be the instructional one, or no, the next page this is the summary that I give every month. So in this, I show people what their prior year, their current year, and then how much money they have remaining and how much they've used this year versus last year. And this gives people an idea of where they are in their budget on a monthly basis. The following page is the administrative, and this is for the administrative lines, and I also show them how much they have spent, and so that they can track. If someone is getting close, I remind them. They often, almost all the time, let me know that they're getting close to being at the top of their budget. And if it warrants, we'll talk to the division director to see if there's a reason that they should go over. But basically, or mostly, people are not supposed to go over their budget, and they pretty much don't. So that's how we do it at the Philadelphia school. Now, Lisa, you want to talk about how you do it at Moorestown Friends?
Okay, that was good, Carol. Thanks. And we very similar, except I think, well, I'll just go through basically to start off with our budget cycle, just to give you an idea how it's a little different from Carol's, because I actually start right in October. As soon as I've approved the current year budget, I start working on the next year budget. And basically, I send out forms to everybody who has a budget that they're responsible for, and just and ask them to plan with their department or their division and submit a budget, a detailed budget. And as I mentioned before, the department chairs' budgets go to the division directors. So there's collaboration in terms of approvals, and ultimately it comes through our associate head of school and comes to me. Also, at the same time, I am meeting with, the admissions director to get the enrollment projection. I'm also meeting with the head of school to talk about staffing and tuition increases and personnel compensation increases. So that's sort of all happening at the same time, and we're then pulling all of that together. Next slide, please. We also, and I'll just include a little bit more detail in my budget cycle, because at that point we do go to our finance committee. I have a report that I call a key variable report that pulls out the key variables such as enrollment, tuition increases, salary increases, and plugs in all the other budget requests to give our finance committee an idea of where the budget's falling at that stage of the process, you know, whether we're looking at a deficit perhaps. And so it sort of, you know, signals to them that we need to go back and do some more work to tighten the reins in, or whatever the case may be. And then ultimately we will go in January to our school committee or our board with the preliminary budget to get the approval. You can go on to the next slide, Aggie. But so the so the people who are requesting budgets, I have some forms at the end of the presentation that I'll go through with you. I do give them some guidance, but we don't, you know, I don't ask them or expect them to break down their budget requests by, you know, per student costs or anything like that. Especially if we're talking about the instructional accounts. There's just some general guidelines. You know, if you have trips and you have to find out the cost of your transportation, as Carol said, you know, you just need to come to the business office and get that information. But for the most part, you're responsible for knowing or finding out how much something's going to cost, whatever it is you're planning for those for your expenditures. But for the most part, you know, I think it's safe to say whether you're an administrative department or an instructional department, you're pretty much, even though it's zero-based budgeting, you are pretty much talking about the same thing year after year with just minor changes. So it doesn't require a whole lot of time to invest in the process after your first year. And I don't have training sessions. I only do that with people who are new to the school or who are new to the budget process. And I will sit down and go over with them what historical costs have been and just go through the procedure. But ultimately, it's up to them to figure out what they are planning for their department and assign costs to those expenditures. We do, however, send out, and the first bullet point here, which is talking about reporting, we do send out every month basically a general ledger printout of whatever account you're responsible for, and we show you your budget for the year and what you've spent to date, and it's itemized or detailed so that you can see what you've paid for, what vendors you've paid, and if you need more detail than that, if you find an error or something, you need to come down to the business office and look up that invoice. But that allows the managers, the budget managers, to monitor their spending. And as Carol said, most everyone who has budget responsibility at our school really appreciates that they own their budget and they like getting the information back from us, and they know and that they're welcome to come to the business office and talk to the controller or talk to the bookkeeper or even talk to me about, you know, any questions that they may have. We very seldom go over budget. I mean, the only time we would really go over budget if somebody made a mistake, which seldom happens, right? But the other thing that is helpful for me, and the second bullet point here, which talks about projections, is that in April, I do a forecast every year. So I forecast and report to the finance committee and to the board whether or not I expect that we are going to meet our budget. And the way I do that is I go back to all of our budget managers, so all of the department chairs, the division directors, the administrative department managers. I go back to all those people and I say, you know, look at your budgets, look at what you spent to date, and I need you to tell me if you anticipate that you are going to be over or under budget by more than 5%. And they send their responses back to me, and at that point I can then put a forecast together where I can project whether or not we are going to meet our budget. And that's really key into this whole process. I had another thought, but it went out of my head. Maybe it will come back to me.
Lisa, to that, when we're talking about overages, and again, they don't happen with here very often at all, but when something unanticipated comes up that's big, for example, we decided to have a professional company help with our 3rd grade play. And it was $7,000. And when that budget expense came in, I made sure I put it in the 3rd grade where the play was happening. I didn't find a place for it, because if you do that, when the next year they're planning their budget, they will forget about the playwright for the 3rd grade play, and then it'll be nowhere. So when budgets go over, I just put it where that expense logically should reside, as opposed to finding a place that's going to go under in the budget. I know some people do that, and I think that's very dangerous when you're doing zero-based budgeting.
Carol, I think that's a great point. People come to me throughout the year, especially when I ask them to forecast whether or not they're going to be under or over budget. And they'll, every now and then someone will say, well, there was this unexpected thing, that came up and we'd like to do this, but it's going to put us over budget. What should we do? And I have the same response to them. First of all, the only way we approve something going over budget is if we can compensate for that overage by going under in some other part of the budget. Having said that, yes, we still want it to be charged to the appropriate cost center. So you're absolutely right, and we do the exact same thing. But I will say that it's very unlikely that we would move forward with doing something that's going to result in going over budget unless we have identify where we're going to be under budget somewhere else. And of course, all of that information is then, communicated to the board when they say, well, why is this under budget? Why is that over budget? Well, we knew that was going to happen, and we planned it that way. So, next slide, Aggie. And then I have my forms, and I just want to spend a moment on my forms because I want to leave time for any questions. And you can this form is actually on 2 slides. So it begins on this slide and then it goes on to the next slide. But this is, that's okay. You can go back up a second. This one, this is like a cover sheet that I send out. And this is to all of the instructional departments. And so it is going to help you can see it's divided up by department chairs. Then we have a category of all school instruction, which includes our library, our audiovisual, student diversity, religion. These are the categories that are not divided up by divisions, but go to the address all 3 divisions. And you can see that I've listed some examples of so just looking at the department chairs, of the type of items that should be included in their budget. So supplies and material for the general and routine activities related to your department, departmental membership in professional organizations, magazine subscriptions, general enrichment of the department, not to be confused with professional development that goes into a different line, field trips, other expenditures at your discretion, and then we actually have a separate process for capital expenditures. But you can go on to the next slide, Aggie, sorry. And so then we have similarly, we have guidelines for the athletic department, and then we have a lot of student activities and clubs, and then we just have instructions as to when these forms get turned back in. You can go on to the next slide. I just wanted to show you, this is an example. The slides that we just looked at were the cover sheet. This would then be a blank sheet that would be attached to the cover sheet. And in this case, it's for account number 512-7250, which is called Camden Scholar Student Support. And the person who was responsible for developing this budget at the bottom is Dorothy Lopez, and here's an example of what she is requesting for her budget. And you can see that she's itemized very nicely, but it's not a tremendous amount of detail. She may have more detail for herself. I personally don't need that much more detail because, as Carol says, if people never come to me and say, can I do such and such? Is it in my budget? Because as Carol said, I didn't create the budget, it's your budget. And if you find, mid-year that you don't need to do the summer tutoring and enrichment for $5,000 that you thought you needed to do, then feel free to, increase one of the other items or do something else. As long as you're in charge of your budget and you know why you're making these changes, and as long as it doesn't exceed the total of $54,300. Next slide, Aggie. And so before I open it up to questions, Carol, did you have anything to add to those slides?
That's it. Thank you.
Does anybody, you can unmute now, I guess, if you have any. And I don't know if anyone was submitting questions to Aggie via chat. Aggie, did you get any questions?
No, I don't have any questions, but I think both of you alluded to this, and I just want to make sure that everybody hears this, that the forms aren't the magic, it's the conversations and the training and the meetings that you have with people that really goes into successful zero-based budgeting.
Right. And also, my meetings are 3 half-hour meetings a month, so it's only an hour and a half a month. It's not a lot.
I do have a question. This is Martha. Does anybody ever say they need a certain amount of money and you have to say, well, I can't give you that much?
Yes. I mean, sometimes budgets get much bigger. They get double what they were before or something. And they need to go to their division directors or their managers first when they're proposing something much different than the previous, because they are usually initiatives that need to be vetted as they're the priorities of the school for the following year. But people also have something that's much lower. Sometimes the initiative for one year will not carry over to the next, and then it'll be also different, it'll be lower, and that's a discussion as well. So yeah, they do. I mean, but if the division director thinks it's a good idea, I mean, that's done in the budgeting process, and we make sure that everything nets to zero, and so we put it in.
And just to add to that, first of all, people very seldom come to me and just say they just need a certain amount of money. If, as Carol's saying, you go through the process. The first thing is, and let's just say I'm the World Language Department Chair, and I've been meeting all year with my department, and over the year we recognize that maybe we, see the need to supplement our program with some digital textbooks or something, some new program that we have researched and we've been talking about. We know that we want to include that next year as part of our program. So at the point where the department chair is putting together a budget, they've already had conversations about this for the leading up to this point with their department. I'm sure at some point they've probably discussed it with their division head, but even if they haven't, once they put together their budget and they include this additional cost for some digital textbook or something that they want to supplement their program, they're going to go to the division director and say, well, this is what our department's been talking about and this is what we need to do, but it's going to add another $10,000 to our department expenditures. And if the division head approves it, then that's fine, it gets approved. The division head may at that point not be sure and want to talk to me about it some more and say, look, can we fit this into the budget? And, so, I mean, it is definitely a process, and it's not, I don't really see it as a linear process, but it's, it's these points where you're communicating both up and down the line, if you will. And, you know, when it all comes together, everybody feels really comfortable with where you've ended up. And there are very seldom any problems, at least at my school. And I think Carol's saying the same thing there.
It looks like Yvonne Wagner has a question.
There was a chat question.
Yeah.
Can you ladies see that?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
I was just wondering, at what point do you cut off making revisions to the budget after it has been approved? Once our budget is approved, it is final. We do not change it after the board approves it. And that is what goes into the reporting. Like Lisa, we show all the expenses in detail with the vendor names. And then we show that versus their budget and how much they have left. That doesn't change. What may change over time is if someone has a new unanticipated expense that the budget managers or that the division directors agree is a really important thing that we should be doing. And in that case, I put that in the projection, but like Lisa, I'm also looking at some lines that might not spend their entire amount of money. My budget gets approved by the board in May for the following year. And Lisa, yours?
So in January, we present our preliminary budget. And by preliminary, we've gone through this process. We've pulled everything together. The preliminary budget approval allows us to set tuition increases for the next year and get our enrollment agreements out. It also allows us to set salary increases for the next year so we can get our letters of agreement out. But between that point in January and the start of the school year in September, lots of things happen, and you may become aware of new initiatives, or you may become more clear on things such as your health insurance renewal or your business insurance renewal, things like that. And what we do is in August, I prepare a final budget that has revisions, because at that point, we're pretty certain what our enrollment is. We've completed all of our hiring, hopefully. So we know our salaries, we know our enrollment, we know what the tuition revenue is going to be. We've made our financial aid awards, and I take into account any revision requests, which get sent to me, and I hold them in a folder. And then during the summer, that's what I work on, is finalizing the budget and trying to incorporate any of the revisions that have been sent to me, so that the first board meeting in September, that's when we present the final budget.
Any other questions?
Any other questions for Carol and Lisa? Well, if not, I would just like to say thank you to both of you for an outstanding presentation. I think this was really helpful and a great way to share expertise. So thanks for being the guinea pigs in our Zoom presentations over lunch.
Well,
And,
thank you for thinking of this. I think it's great, and anybody who wants to follow up, I'm sure with either of us, just shoot us an email. I'm sure Carol and I have forms that can help you, or have any quick questions. We'll be happy to answer them, individually if you like.
Yep.
And I wanted to thank you as well. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, you guys.
so if you have other ideas for workshops that we can offer this way, just let me know, and I'd be happy to set them up and work with you to pull information together and publicize them, and hopefully work on the technology. One last reminder, we are offering 1 CPE credit for this for all of you accountants. So you can certainly take advantage of that and contact Ron if you want to receive credit for today's program. And if there's nothing else, I would just like to adjourn our meeting, and thank you once again to Carol and Lisa.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.